Ryan, good morning. And my first question for you is, I know, what are you doing so we don't run off coordinators every year anymore? Now you got Heartline gone, you got everything going on. What is it? Is it you?
Well, I think when you look at some of the teams that have had success over the last really 2 decades in college football, it's probably one of the things that is the biggest challenge. You look at you start with Coach Saban and that run. You look at Coach Meyer, you look at his run, and then you look at the different coordinators that can't come in and out, and it's one of the biggest challenges I think that we face. When you have success like this, and I think you do everything you can, but you also understand that these guys have careers and they want opportunity, and like I say to the players, this can't just be a pass through though, and so we have to do a good job on the front end of making sure we bring in really quality guys that do a great job, but also understand what it means to be at Ohio State. I think both of these guys are that way. When you have to talk somebody into coming from the NFL to college football, probably not good. Both of these guys wanted to be here. They saw the opportunity, and they've embraced it. But you look at some of the runs that teams have gone on. You look at the Clemson run, and Brent Venables was was Dabo's defense coordinator, and now he's the head coach at Oklahoma. You look at the run that Kirby went on, and he had Coach Monken, who's now with the Browns, and certainly we've had our run, and Chip went on to Vegas, and so these things happen, and you just have to do a good job of making sure you have the next guy ready to go, but you also keep the culture in place, and I think that's where you look at Mark Pantoni, you look at Mick Barati, you look at Larry Johnson. These guys have been here for 12 to 15 years. I'm going on 10 years now, so there is stability here, but there also is going to be that movement when you do have success.
Talked about being here for almost a decade. It seems like you just got here maybe a year or two ago.
I know.
I mean, how fast has that gone, and what has this process been like for you? It's your first head coaching job that I want to say you fell into, but I don't think you were coming here expecting to be the head coach of Ohio State.
No, but it never goes the way you think. I remember even when I was younger, Nina and I during the summer when you have a little time to catch your breath, we would sit down and talk about, okay, so how do you think the next year is going to play out? What we realized after the first 5 years is no matter what we think is going to happen, something different is going to happen. And so when we saw Ohio State, coming from the NFL was just really my experience there for a couple of years was just the uncertainty and everything that came with it, and we just got knocked around a little bit. And when we saw Ohio State, we saw stability, and then once we got here, we realized it was about opportunity, and that's exactly what happened for us. And so here we are, and I tell that to all the recruits, all the coaches that come here, like this is about opportunity. There's nothing that you can't accomplish here, and to your point, yeah, I mean when year one in 17 certainly was the first experience of being at Ohio State, and then 18 was sort of wild, and then before you know it, you're in it in 19, and then every year you just learn and you grow more and more. I don't know if you're ever ready for a job like this. Certainly not as your first time as a head coach, but I still, I got to give a lot of credit to Gene Smith. I think back on that time, and for him to look at me as somebody that was ready for this moment, not having the experience, I'm forever in debt for him taking that chance.
You talked a little bit about throughout the offseason bringing 50-plus guys, new guys, whether it's recruits or transfers. Usually during camp, you've always kind of found where that's where you find out the most about your team, what they're good at, the fabric of them. How long do you feel like that'll take during this, given the influx of new players, to be able to find out kind of what your team is made of and what you're probably good at?
Yeah, and that's why in the July with Mick, that's why we try to put him in as many situations we can that are really hard to figure out how guys are going to respond, because that's what this season's going to be. It's going to be hard, but that really is what life's all about. We just had our champions meeting last night, and to see guys getting recognized for all the hard work that they put in, and it's really a great experience. It's my favorite meeting of the year because guys get recognized, and when they do get recognized, I mean, they come down and the look in their eye and the energy in their eye, and they're hugging up their teammates and they're hugging up Coach Mick. And the reason that it is that way is because it is so hard. It's and that's sort of like the secret to life is like the struggle and going through hard times, but then coming out the back end knowing you accomplished something. And so, to your point, we have to make preseason hard because the season is going to be hard. And it's like, any foundation, only gets tested when a real storm comes. So how do we create that in practice is sort of the challenge for us every day. Now, not today. Today we just have helmets and we're just getting started. But quickly we need to dive into this because we have to be ready to go early in the season.
So when you talk about the growing and the change and every year getting better and going through things, if you could go back to when you started as a head coach at Ohio State, and I know you do a lot of, I'm sure, self-reflection of the offseason and things, what could I have done differently, what should I have done differently, how have you evolved as a coach, or like either on the field or off the field, but how has that evolution been for you? Can you think of anything specific where it's like, I do this better now because of this?
Well, a lot of things. I start with communication, just being up in front of the team and being able to articulate exactly what your expectations are, exactly where we're going, the vision, and making sure that's crystal clear, and then making sure there's alignment throughout the organization. Same thing with communication with the staff, making sure that everybody understands exactly what is important within the program, and then making sure everyone follows through and coaching the coaches along that way. And then assembling the staff. I think that one of the things I was afforded was, there was already structure in place, there was already a staff in place, but that wasn't, necessarily the group that I hired. So there was a transition there. And so, finding it and making sure it fits, what, the way that, I wanted it to be and the way that we wanted it to be moving forward, that was important. And then making sure you're bringing in the right pieces. But every year you learn more and more. And I think one of the biggest things is making sure everybody understands the expectations, holding them to those expectations, and communicating clear and holding everybody accountable on a daily basis.
So, been here almost a decade. You watched your family grow up. Final year for your son in high school, juggling, chasing a national championship versus being a dad. I was talking with Rick Neuheisel about this on XM, and it's always, a struggle as a coach trying to balance those things. And obviously, I'm immensely proud of what he's accomplished. But seeing him grow up through here and now finishing up at DeSales, trying to juggle this year and the emotions and maybe managing the emotions of your wife a little bit,
Right.
Probably, which is even a little different.
Yeah. I think the thing that's great about this is that, he's, just a couple miles away.
Yeah.
He's in here a lot. And so we're able to share the experience together, even though I'm not with him every single moment. And I think that's what it is because, for him, like he lives and dies with every game here. He knows what the expectation is. He wants us to win every game. And I want him to be the best quarterback in the country and maximize everything he's doing on a daily basis. So, while we're both chasing these things, we're doing it together. Maybe not we're physically next to each other, but we are together along the way. And I think that's what's been great about this experience for me as a dad, having a son that just loves the game so much. And I can't say that he loved the game when he was real young, but he fell in love with it. And I said this to our staff the other day because, I think we have over 60 young people, kids, within the staff. So we have a lot of young kids that are part of our family here. And I suggest to them, get them around our guys because our locker room raised my son.
Oh, yeah, and that's always the relationship and seeing when he's a 10-year-old versus him now on the Buckeye Cruise, hanging out with Julian and these guys it's amazing watching him go from like a boy into a young man.
Because interactions with former players, interactions with people in the community, interactions with the locker room, and seeing high achievers, but all those little conversations along the way have allowed him to be who he is. And Nina and I are very, very proud of how we've raised him, but this whole community and this whole team in that locker room helped raise him. And being around high achievers like this and people who care has led him to where he is today, right now. And so we're excited about the senior year for him.
You said your son loves the game. Do you love your schedule this year?
You know what? When you look at our schedule, I said this yesterday. If you right now on our wall, there's 17 games listed. If you look at the 17 games, I'm predicting at least 11 of them are going to be top 25 matchups, probably top 15 matchups. How amazing is that going to be for us in terms of gaining an identity and winning games in the fourth quarter? And so that as we continue to work through the season, by the time we get to those games at the end, we're going to be ready for these matchup games. Probably listed on that schedule is more matchup games than we probably ever had in maybe the history of the school. I don't know. But I can tell you it's going to be a challenge. So what is it going to force us to do? Be at our best every single day. So we're excited about the challenge. We got some unbelievable road games, and we're going to have to be tough early in the season.
Depth's always the question, especially now in the portal. You have young players, and then you have your starters. Gone are kind of the transitional guys that are probably a year away, trying to balance that and figure that out.
Yeah, and now that the fifth year got passed, so guys, everyone's going to play. That should play. So we're not looking at any redshirting. And when guys have that mentality of, maybe I'm going to redshirt. No, there's no redshirt. Go play. Feel free to win a job. So we have to get everybody going. We're going to need everybody, as you know, with the long season. If we're going to play 17 games, 16 games, we're going to need guys along the way to play at a high level. And like you said, there's also guys that haven't played at Ohio State. There's a difference, as you know. So, we have to get guys ready really fast. This morning, first 4 days, right now, we have our young guys, our newcomers and freshmen meeting early. Then we bring everybody else in to try to integrate the rooms and equate the meeting rooms in terms of knowledge before we get going on the field.
Thanks for the time, Ryan. We appreciate it. If you need help out there, depth-wise linebacker, Bobby brought his helmet in. He's ready to go out there if you need it. So
All right.
appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, you got it.
That was Ryan Day, head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tell you what's got us juiced next. Morning Juice.